But like, remember that corduroy coat that we saw, the green one? She ended up buying it.
I did. So you had seen it. It's really nice. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, it wasn't that one. I thought it was going to be the better one. It's good. I think it's good for like fall. It's good. Not
Okay, midnight winter, not winter.
Yeah. I'm glad I got it. Yeah, but I don't know why. I mean,
I bought a scarf.
Yeah. Great.
I don't think it's that high.
Hayden? Mimi.
Yes, I'm reading it.
The one.
No, no.
It's just about like
I know, I read it, but then I like reading it again.
Okay, I'm gonna turn off tethering.
Oh, yeah, please do.
So we are live now as well. Thomas, are you okay?
Yep. Which time?
Okay, there's maybe this side anyway. So Jess and Mimi here, please. Here? Yeah, by the window or maybe there, Thomas. We can check, right? We'll try like this.
Okay.
Actually, this is quite cozy.
Oh.
Meet beds. What did you teach me? Meet beds. What did you teach me? This is cozy.
Me, sit.
Me seat. Yeah. So, me seat. Yeah.
Just gonna figure out what I'm going to do with the recorder. Anyone want to help me with my bag? Oh, thank you so much. So, Safar. Safar means journey in Farsi. Moving with dreams, wastelands, and our utopian realities. Safar is a series of performances in public space, performative talks between activists, thinkers, witches, and artists about anarchy, strategy, possible utopian realities, and the spaces our bodies inhabit. Dreams practiced in wastelands and gardens of exiles. Outside or parallel or beyond the patriarchal, capitalist, heterosexist, colonial, hegemonic order, there are realities of sisterhood, love, collaboration, care, hope, and community. Sharing influence and not taking power in solidarity. In Safar, we, the duo, aghili Karlsson, invite sisters we admire. We ask them to share parts of their lives and their visions in a traveling performative talk, moving from the center of Stockholm to our studio in the rural areas on the edge of the city. A participatory travel where others can join in moving, talking, and sharing a meal. We are so happy, honored, and excited that our first guests in this series are Mimi Onuoha, artist and researcher, Jess Myers, urbanist. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Maybe we should open, we were actually talking about this earlier, about how to like bring people into a space. So like maybe we should open by saying like thank you, all of you, so much for getting up on Sunday morning and like coming to ride the train with us. And thank you to Nassim and to Bjorn for inviting us here. We appreciate that this is a really new format and that you would sort of take the risk on us to be the first ones. Yeah, so thanks everyone.
Yes, thank you. And we have a whole crew here. Yeah. So let's make sure that we're not talking to nobody. We're talking to everyone who's here.
Yeah, so I don't know where we should kick off. I think it's funny because we were having this conversation yesterday at dinner talking about like how I identify myself and how I get very I'm like a trained architect, I guess. But it's funny to try and be in a space of being interdisciplinary in a real way, like a way that like you're actually drawing a lot of energy and resources and references from a bunch of different places. So I've sort of felt, and this has come from being here in this residency at IASPIS for 3 months and sort of thinking about my practice as well as doing a practice, or even admitting that I have a practice, has been, okay, I write and I edit and I do this, the podcast that I'm here to do, Here There Be Dragons.
Season 3 coming out soon.
It'll drop. And urbanist feels like it fits over everything. So I also want to like ask you a little bit about how you come into being an artist, because your background is also anthropology.
Yeah, well, this is funny. This is what we were talking about last night. We're talking about this at dinner, because we were saying that if you have too many titles, if you're like, I'm an artist, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a dancer, I'm a teacher, I'm a believer, I'm a CEO, everyone's like, you do nothing at all. Stop it, you do nothing. But I think for me, the thing I always liked about artist is that it doesn't say anything. It just really talks about how you approach a world, and it doesn't necessarily say like what exactly it is that you do. So I liked it because I felt like it held the most space. And I feel like this is the tension that we are always talking about, is how do you deal with being in between fields, being interdisciplinary, but knowing that you still have to operate within a system that needs to sort you somewhere? How do you hold both of those things at the same time? And then the step after that, which is like, how dependent are they? Like, to be in the in-between, you still need to have these other fields, and how much do you need that? Or is there a way that we can envision just not needing to have all of that?
Yeah.
And then also, of course, realizing as much as I'm like, oh, I don't know, I do operate very much within an art context. Even this, like, this is a great example. This is a series which is outside of like a gallery, a white cube, but we are still like, this is an art intervention. And that does something, that gives people a grounding. That gives us something as well, you know?
Yeah, it gives you a place to start from. Like for me, urbanist is like, again, what is it that you do? But at the same time,
I'm so sorry,
oh,
Jess.
no.
Did I just
yeah, it's
do
okay.
it like that? Then everyone will hear you better. We really want.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it creates this thing where it's like you do something that has to do with the built environment, and it's like I always want to be doing things that have to do with the built environment, because I think since I was like really small, like I was very attracted to like cities and buildings and things like this. But the way that we talk about it in academic settings feels really closed off to having other conversations. And once you're like, oh, I want to engage with like a sociological practice or with like a research practice or things like this that are not the typical references of the built environment in the academy, then you become an other thing. You become like something that's like outside of this context. So it's like you get evicted in a way if you don't have like these more typical reference points or more typical project types. Like if you are saying like, I'm an architect, but the thing that comes out at the end is not a building or is not a piece of a built intervention, but it is informed by that way of thinking. It's informed by those tools. So your way of clawing back into the discipline that you studied is always demonstrating that like I'm using a set of tools that comes from this place, which is what I feel about academia as well, is that academia almost sees itself as like these outputs, like a paper, a publication, these things, as opposed to seeing themselves as like a set of tools. And how do I take a set of tools and apply them in a lot of different ways? And that becoming an approach to interdisciplinarity, as opposed to I'm pulling a bunch of disciplines, I'm like magpieing a bunch of disciplines and like pulling them in, but like I'm taking these very solid, very rigorous tools that I was taught within these institutions, and then I apply them to these different approaches. Yeah.
And how is that working for you? Because you are someone who, this urbanist, it's nice, it does suit you. You are trained as an architect, and you do operate in a lot of spaces that are full of architects. And I wonder how is that received? And are you trying to change architecture? Are you trying to create a new space entirely that will then have its own norms that become calcified, become part of it?
Yeah.
He's like,
Ooh.
yeah.
I mean, a lot. Like something that was attractive to me about this, the prompt that Nassim sent was like, we're not necessarily just talking about futures. We're talking about how you're dealing with things right now. And I think, especially as I'm about to start teaching, I haven't taught before, and I'm about to, when I leave Stockholm, I'm going to start doing a studio course for the first time. And I guess what I'm trying to get at, especially with this conversation around skill sets and tools, is I'm interested in architects like being more conscious of, or also planners being more conscious of what the tool set is, and like, as opposed to being like, I apply this in the same way over and over again, how can I apply it to like a myriad of other things in an equally rigid, like not rigid, but rigorous, not surface level, but extremely focused way. Not like, because sometimes I feel like in the design fields we sort of scatter a lot of ideas across the surface and don't re-engage with them or get rigorous about them. And instead it's just like, I'm playing, I'm like, look at all these things that can happen. Like I think I saw, those projects like it's a seesaw over the border wall, or it's a refugee raft that also looks like a swan boat, or things like this. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, let me try and like collage together something for an argument, but it's just like, but then how are you using these tools that you have to give meaning or purpose to what that is, or bring talk about, sort of facilitate a conversation in a way?
I mean, I think this is, so I teach within a program in New York, at New York University. I don't know why I stuttered on the words. And the program is necessarily interdisciplinary, in that it is difficult to define. Even like you graduate with this MPS, which is a Master's of Professional Studies, but they don't say what the studies are. So it's so difficult. And I think for a lot of, in fact, the program is really dealing with a lot right now, because for a long time, that has been its selling point, as being like, we're here, we're on the edges, like we can get away with this. Mm-hmm. And now a lot of there's this thing that often gets said, which is people in charge of the program have often said, we are preparing you for jobs that don't yet exist, which is kind of like this future that sounds really nice. It sounds, it's like, that's what we want, that's what we want. And a lot of students are now coming in, paying, I will also say, like $60,000 a year for the program. I know, it's terrible, it's really challenging. And they're coming in and they're like, well, I need a job like when I graduate, not in the future. I need the job now. And it's it's the same tension again, this like, okay, there's the thing that we want, and we're trying to like embody that. And the school is doing that in many ways, and also failing in other ways, which we can talk about later. But this, like, there are these pressures of this particular moment that we're living in, of this world, of capitalism, of what it means to exist, how you get to actually live out these things, that the students are just constantly negotiating.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same in my architecture school. I remember when I graduated, my grandparents come to see me graduate, and the dean of my school said something to the effect of like, no one hires Princeton's like architects because they don't know how to build anything. You just know how to talk about it. Ha 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 ha. And my grandparents were just like, could I talk to him afterwards? Like, could you make that more clear? Because this is a very, again, expensive school. And like, to your point, it's like I needed a job right away. And I saw, like, when I was applying for jobs afterwards too, that like people also don't know what to do with you. Yeah. Like you do need to, like, as future facing as you want the program to be, like, you're on your own afterwards. And like, even the way that professors can help you, it's not very concrete the way that happens. So you kind of, have to cobble something together for yourself, which is, I think, what I found myself doing, and what in a lot of ways you find yourself doing as well. But at the same time, I also want to talk about like the technology focus of your practice. Yeah. I often, from the outside, am really looking for something to hang on to when it comes to technology, because it seems to be also a driving force right now in the art scene. Not that I know anything about the arts. Am I an artist? Who's to say? But I just wanted to know your experience of like really applying this lens of this anthropological lens to tech, and like again bringing this skill set, this like rigorous like research look, but then the output being also art interventions and objects and things like that.
Yeah, I think the thing is, so a lot of my practice has to do with really technology, and particularly like emerging technology, and I focus a lot on data-driven systems, but I'm really using those, but I'm focusing on the power relationships, the social dynamics within them. And to me, that's the part that's kind of the anthropological aspect of it, and that's the part to me that is so like tied down to the ground. That's the thing that I understand really well. And I think because that's the way I came into the field, it has made it so that I see those connections in a way that the way that the tech world is kind of presented is, I think, intentionally opaque. It is meant to be like, we are beyond you. You couldn't possibly understand what's behind this black box. It's better for you not to know. Stay away. You know, there is this kind of language around that. It's a strange, seemingly meritocratic, but it's not at all kind of practice. And because that's not how I came into that, it always was clear to me that that wasn't the case. So I'll explain. I'll give an example. I know you've heard about this project, so I'm sorry that you have to hear about it.
I love to hear about it again and again.
So one of the first like art interventions that I ever did was like a long time ago. It was like 8 or 9 years ago. What is time? And I was living in Brooklyn, and I was getting catcalled all of the time. You know this project. Y'all know what I mean when I say catcalled. Okay, great. And at the time, it was like particularly grotesque because it was like summer and people were saying really just terrible, disgusting things. And the thing is, I just felt dumb and annoyed because I never would say anything back in the moment. I'd always be like, you too, you know, but I was like gone and it doesn't matter. And so I was looking for a way to sort of respond to people and kind of get this across. And so what I started doing for the summer was I would give people a piece of paper that had my phone number on it. Whenever they catcalled me, I'd walk up and I'd give them this piece of paper with the phone number. And they thought it was my phone number, but I had set it up and it was connected to a server, and I had actually programmed these different messages that would be sent only if you texted it. And so what happened was, for the whole summer, I would give this thing out, and then people would kind of text me, and I could watch, like go to my computer and watch this conversation unfolding with these people. And I had done it for this reason where I was like, oh, I just want to have a way to like feel like I have some agency. And also, I was very young, I was very early in my practice, so the messages were like they were like, I wish you knew how I felt. Or like, you know, they were like really, sorry, let me not curse. But they were just very like over the top. But people, like they did respond. But then the thing that became most important to me wasn't even the messages that they sent. It was the fact that at the end of the summer, I ended up with this data set, which was all the phone numbers of my catcallers because they had texted me and they had opted in. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I have this data set, which to me means very much. And contained within this is like, this like fear I felt walking up to these people, and then the weirdness of like feeling like I am connected to them and we're having this conversation, but I'm not really having it, but I programmed it. Because this is like before bots, before Amazon, like this is before all that. And like there's so much that's contained, and then like there's this weird, now they're part of a group that they don't know that they're part of. What does that mean? And then I realized to anybody else, this is just a list of numbers, it's just data. But clearly it's actually this site that is holding all of these different dynamics, and there's so much that's part of it. And so that was the thing where I was like, oh shit. I was like, okay, there's something here and I really want to understand this. And in this point of collecting and forming this, actually, we have different types of power in this moment. And so because that's how I came into the field, for me, it's just impossible for me to look at anything, any data set or any kind of like technological artifact without being very intimately aware that there's labor behind it. There's a thing that's missing, like you look at it and there's a labor that is gone. There's like a power that is inherent within it. But the thing that is, it looks so banal and you're just like, oh, it's just technology, it doesn't matter. And so that's where I've always stood. And I think a lot of the work I've tried to do is be like, y'all, how do we, this is intentionally obscured in many ways. How do we bring it to the surface? Because it's very, like we should be talking about it. Talking about tech, and I'm gonna stop after this because I'm sorry, get really into it, but talking about like there's this conversation around technology and it's spoken about as if it emerges from Silicon Valley and just this like group of mostly I would say like upper to like middle class white men who like in white collar jobs building these, like that's like the story of it. But in fact, this is a story that stretches, it's like Ghana, we can talk about e-waste, we can talk about a lot of machine learning laborers from Venezuela and Egypt. No one was like, this is actually the work that makes this happen, and it's a global system, and but you see like an item, you see one thing and you're like, oh, it's just my cell phone. And it's really like a package for a web of just power connections.
But one thing that I've always admired about the way that you approach how you set up your pieces, how you set up your research, how you set up your teaching practice as well, is the consideration you put into decisions and accountability. And that being a part of your recognition of power is, I think, very important and extremely rare in these kind of academic studies of thinking about like, it's not just putting a reading on a syllabus. It's not just deciding to collect a bunch of numbers. It's that you have made a choice, you've made a decision, and now you're accountable towards it. And like I also think about that so much in terms of the way that I do the podcast, is my accountability towards the people that I'm researching, towards the people that I'm interviewing. And like I remember last season, the season that I did about Paris, when I was interviewing people in French, which is my second language, and often the people that I'm talking to, their native language, and the way that I had to translate and then also find voice actors and things like this for the series was that I'm making so many editorial decisions before I'm even getting to a script, because I'm deciding how people get to engage with the voices of these people. I'm deciding how to articulate the way that they have been interviewed. And then with this season where people are speaking in English, so I don't have to do that as much, there's also this fraught situation of me interviewing someone in my native language, and the language is often the second language of the person that I'm talking to. And like all the strategies that you have to have within the interview itself to try and create a sense of comfort, or the strategies that you use afterwards in order to ensure that people know that there's like some kind of translating or some kind of, there's a level of difference there. And I think it's important that people know that, because it affects the way that you can express yourself, and also it's a part of editorial choices that are being made.
Right.
Yeah.
That choice, that's the thing. The first decision, the decisions that no one sees, those are some of the most powerful ones. And that's, I mean, it seems like that, you talk about this a lot with the podcast, and I'm just really interested if you can kind of keep thinking through this concept of accountability. Keep thinking about, because you talk about this a lot when it comes to the built environment and how cities are designed to sort of support different types of actions, or to, like, some of this is like about the class we were talking about, like talking about how the design of a city can kind of influence something. How do you bring accountability when you're thinking about that? And even not just the built part of it, but the way the power systems are encoded within that.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that sometimes I'm like, am I just being too anguished about this in a way? Yeah. Power, decision making,
accountability.
But when you're moving within an institution and sort of trying to make the changes that will allow an institution to actually be supportive of creating new knowledge, calling to attention people's decision making and the power that comes from that decision making is often like the most uncomfortable part, where it's just like, yes, you could change X, Y, or Z about your institution if you quit making this decision and make another set of decisions, or give other people the power to make these decisions as well. That becomes like the most intense place to be talking to people, because often it then falls into this question of not like power, but of morality. And often people's personal senses of morality, of saying like, I'm a good person, or I never intended X, or I never intended Y. And people's intentions become more important than the decisions that were made and the like products of those decisions.
Right. And I think this is something, I feel like we talk about this a lot because both of us share in common that we exist within very clear, like stark institutional spaces, but then we also have an aspect to our practices that is not, it's kind of like us running around trying to do some stuff on our own, which is still like within various communities, but not within an institution necessarily. And so it makes it more clear. But I always think of this thing that you say where you're like, some of these institutions were not designed for us to do this kind of work. So we're here trying to hack away at it but they were not designed. And having that in mind is good to know. It doesn't change the reality, but it is a thing. I think about it. You say this all the time, and it's true. And this question of like, when you are in institutions, this question always of intention, which I am bored with, which I'm like, I don't care what you intended. Let's talk about what the actions are. Let's talk about this. It comes up over and over and over again, kind of as a way to avoid responsibility, avoid accountability again. Back to this being accountable to something.
Because it's like, I don't have to be accountable towards what's actually happening if I can call back to my own intention for what I wanted to happen, or what I say that I wanted to happen, which I find a complete waste of time. And we have so little time, especially in these programs.
Yep.
Could I just
do it
like this?
Nice. Great.
Especially at these programs, that we have in this that we have in the States, or that you have anywhere, where it's like you're in an institution where there is a timestamp for how long you're going to be there. So it's like 4 years, 2 years. How long do students who want to do different things, or faculty who want to do different things, spend just trying to create the conditions where they can get to the thing, you know? And it's just like, that is what makes an institution incapable of creating new knowledge. If they are forcing people to reinvent the wheel, or to create conditions where they can get work done, as opposed to like making those decisions before these people get here, you know?
I mean, it reminds me of what Toni Morrison, that famous Toni Morrison quote.
We love it. Tell us.
Where she essentially is like racism gets in the way of us being able to do the other work that we could do, because we have to stop and like address this instead. And I think you can spin that in like 10 different flavors, all different things that get in the way of you doing the work you want to do, because instead you've got to be like, okay, let's talk about this. Like, here we go. And this, like, that choice of when you stop, and this is, I think accountability is a nice framework for this, because I often have to think, when is the moment where you stop and are like, I'm gonna fix, like, deal with this thing, which I don't think I should be the one to deal with the situation that I didn't create that is impacting me. Like, I think someone else should come and fix that, but I see now that it's gonna impact these other people who I feel accountable to. I'm gonna do this, as opposed to when do I just get to be like, no, not today, not doing like.
But it's like, as a person within these institutions who is like a Black woman, for example, students and also faculty will look to you to say, oh, these things need to be fixed. Can you come in and do these things? And it's like important that you be the one who come in and do these things, because it's important to have the representation of someone who looks like you or has your positionality do these things. But it's like, isn't it also important for someone who has my positionality to do the work that I want to do, so people can see that you can do work as a person of this positionality, and you don't just have to continuously create, run on this treadmill of trying to create conditions where people don't have to come up against this again and again and again. But then, rather than that happening, the same institutions that are sort of asking you to do that work are also like, but what I actually want to do is spend all the time explaining to you why we can't do anything differently.
Yeah, I mean, that's one side of it. But then on the other hand, I think they also, I don't know how much of that work they really want to do. I find in many situations people want the fix, but they don't want to have to do the work. Like, I can think of situations I've been in where someone is like, hi, we need more of X type, we think we need more, like, you know, it's almost like they pick from a hat. We need more queer people. No, we need more brown people. No, we need more of this. We need more we need this. And then I'm like, yeah, okay, well, let's think about what that means. And they're like, but can you just like find a list? Can you just email them? Can you bring some of it? I'm like, well, why don't we think about what it means for people to remain, and not just what it takes to bring people in, but how do you cultivate a space where people want to be there and feel that they are able to do the work they want to do there? And that conversation is so much harder that I think in many cases people would rather just be like, come in, than have to think about changing the culture of a place. Because it's a harder thing to do. And I don't, like, it's hard, it's just hard work. It really is.
And it takes time.
So
at the same time, whereas like we know what the score is with institutions now, and of course we can spend energy trying to make these incursions or changes, but sometimes when I look at these spaces, I'm just like, I have a finite amount of time and I want to work on the things that I want to work on, and I don't want all of my energy to be taken up like sort of pressuring institutions to change. So then you look at the institutions as they are, and you're just like, okay, what can I actually use you for? You know, we've talked about this before,
Sure.
where it's just like, when you talk about a white institution as a white institution, what does that mean? It means usually that there are a fixed set of references that are being replayed and replayed and replayed within this institution. They don't have references or the capacity to like engage with work that works with different things. So then what happens is that different types of work, like work that engages like post-colonialism, work that engages like queer theory, work that all of these things then gets labeled as this is important, this is urgent, but no one has a way of engaging beyond that. And then it's enough to be like, okay, we've said that your thing is a good thing, so, and you're here, but nothing gets pushed, right? So it's like no real critical conversation is being had. You don't get to grind your ideas against someone else's ideas and make it like, and use the space of the institution to like make it better, to make it like more, you know?
That's it.
But then, so then it's like, what exists? What do you use this type of institution for now? And I'm just like, sometimes what you're good for is an accessible room for the people that I need to talk to like come into and talk to them. Sometimes like that's what the institution is for. Sometimes the institution is a brand. Sometimes I get to use this brand as its ability to make the way that I articulate things and my ideas, give it that verified like blue check. So people aren't fighting with me about like, well, who are you to come into this space and say these things? I have a little bit, not a ton, but a bit more access because you have these brands, and maybe that's what the institution is for in that moment.
I think that is just such a good point that bears even just repeating, that students who are not part of the dominant culture of these institutions, often one of the huge disservices they get is that the ideas that they have aren't able to get critically strengthened because the other people in the room don't have the tools to do that work for them. And so they come and they bring stuff and everyone says, yeah, this is important, this is good, this is important work. But they don't do, also, you know, I think about it, working in an arts institution, you need crits, you need people to push you on it, and you need them, in order for them to push you, they have to be able to be not just like, oh, I'm uncomfortable right now, so I'm just gonna be like, this is good and we need it. You need them to be able to dive into it. I think one of the biggest compliments you can give to somebody who's creating work is to engage with it deeply. That, to like really be like, I'm gonna sit here and think about your idea and go into it and think about what works and what doesn't work and what could be strengthened, and doing that in a way that is more than just like, yes, this is okay, cool, like this is out of my wheelhouse, that is a thing that could be done. I think that is, it's huge, it's a huge thing, it's such a huge disservice, as you say. And then this kind of comes to the thing, I don't know, one of the things, I'm gonna say this before I hope this is okay, about how often when people ask you what you do, your response is, you're like, I'm a scammer. I scam things all the time. And I adore this. I adore this because it sounds like a very lighthearted joke, but in some ways I think it's a model. This like scamming and hustling like in an institution, realizing when something is not bent to really help you, and then saying, okay, well, how can I get what I need in a way that, like, and all that is also accountable to the people who I feel accountable to. How can I do that? Let me do that. That's what I'm here to do. I think it can be really powerful up to a point, but in that area, it's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like a way of trying to like deal with these situations where you're in an institution and someone says something problematic to you or something absolutely ridiculous about your work. And it's like, I could spend my time trying to argue with this person or like trying to like have the right comeback for this person, or I can also, I mean, you can do both. I'm not saying it has to be one or the other. You can also take that comment and be like, you have just told me, you've given me information for what this institution is for.
Yeah. Now I know what direction.
Now I know what I can do here and what I can't. I know what you're capable of. I know what this institution is capable of being able to hold, and I know it's not capable of because of what you said. And that's what institutions don't know that they're doing.
Yeah.
Is when you continuously fail to broaden your references to produce new knowledge, you're telling people what they can and can't do in your space, and they're going to find a way to do what they want to do somewhere else.
Yeah, of course. Oh, yes, yeah, that's it. That's it. I also think the other thing that model of it's a scam, like as a shorthand for saying,
a scam, yeah.
I see what you are able to do and what I am able to do in response, so I'm going to use what I can and peace, is it also deflates the legitimizing ability of these institutions. Because I do think people can get caught up in like having this name, you know, being at this program, this thing.
Yeah.
And something I like about this model is it just deflates the import. You're like, it's a thing, it's another one of these. I see what it is. I can see through it. I can have that ability. I'm not here trying to like line up all of these things that are not necessarily like they're approved by other institutions who actually who can't do this work that I need.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that I find really, really useful about it.
I think especially sometimes young people and these younger people, I'm not saying that I'm like ancient, but like, younger people can get a little bit caught up in the gratitude framework, right? Like, I've been brought into this space, I need to be so grateful to these people for recognizing my work and like allowing me to be here. You know, the idea of scamming kind of is just like, it's a work. It's recognizing that it's work for you to be here. You have to do all these jukes and jives to like
dodging
and weaving to like get to the work that you need to do, where there is a type of work that can just slide into an institution and like
mediocre
and have everything it needs to pass to like just pass on through, you know?
Yeah, this it reminds me of something. Sarah Hendren, who's an artist who I really, really adore, she often will talk about having a deficit model. Yeah. She talks about how being in these institutions, they kind of encourage this thing where you're like, ooh, am I doing enough? Am I working hard enough? Am I like, ooh, is everything okay? And she's always like, don't operate from that model that you are already indebted to a place. You don't have to do that. You can operate like, actually, I can give something. I am already giving something by being here. It's not like, oh my gosh, I have to. No, you are doing that work. You're putting work in just being there and you're providing something. And that is the thing that I find people who are kind of like, have been, you know, are marginalized, particularly in a space. But that's the thing that those spaces will do, is they encourage this sort of like, you're lucky to be here. You, the only one, you made it. And it's like, no, we got to flip this. You are trying to keep people out and you refuse to acknowledge that. So me being here doesn't mean that I'm exceptional. It means I scammed my way in and I saw the trash that's happening here. And I'm going to take what I can and do what I can and either go or try and make this place better, or both.
And also, especially in terms of like thinking about the entire structure of an institution, like a faculty, staff, student, like the whole structure. It's just like you being there is also a resource for the university, and they're going to keep scooping out of that resource as much as they can. They're going to try to get as much out of you as they possibly can, and that's another thing that model of deficit that you're talking about is doing, is making you feel like they don't need to pressure you because you're pressuring yourself to do that. So I mean, another piece of it is like, you know, my friend Maya Wagner, who works at the Brooklyn Public Library, she says this thing that a lot of comes from organizing theory as well, which is like this question of how do you come into this space? We talked about this, and like how do you come into a space and not think about what isn't there, and you think about what is there already, and you support and build that up, and like have that grow. So it's like if you're an organizer who wants to come into a space and you're just like, oh, I need to go into like a low income neighborhood and try and like build them up and pull them up. It's just like people who live there know what's there and know what isn't there, and are often creating systems that are not really valorized to get to what they need, to get to the resources. Again, scamming, you know, hustling. People are already hustling, so how do you support that hustle already? And that's true of like looking as you as a person in an institution, what is abundant in me already? What are people seeking out? What
are we?
Us.
Oh, we're getting off.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was fast. That was cool.
Yeah.
Because you're brilliant. That's why.
Because the journey is more important.
You see what I did? You see what I did there?
Yeah, I love that though. Focusing on what is already there. I think that's something that I've learned as I've gotten older too, as I've aged.
Yeah, because then it also means you don't have to do all this running around, blah, 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 blah. Like, you're not the person who needs to provide everything.
And it de-emphasizes you.
Yes,
I feel like
de-emphasizes
stuff is, like every institution, this is even for institutions, like you're talking about more communities, but even institutions, people have been doing work from before you got there.
Exactly.
So you can come in and be like, this isn't here, but also like acknowledge you're standing on somebody else's shoulders. It's not like you came in and you discovered everything. I love that. That's the thing I've definitely learned. Okay.
When did you join us? An Odenblad. Oh, okay, and then you tried to find us.
I kind of I was just like, okay, let's wait for the voice. I was speaking really loud. And then I was like, it's Swedish. And then I eventually looked around and it wasn't any of you. So I decided to talk, and then I was literally just not there. So it wasn't.
Oh, where have you found us?
That's great.
To open the door, please press the door button.
Can we open this up to more people?
Yeah.
We've been talking for a while.
Yeah, we've been talking for so
I
long.
know. I'm sure that people
Yeah.
have.
Thoughts.
Yeah. What can I say? Well, maybe we can walk first.
Yeah.
I don't know where we're. Are we
We're
standing?
going on the train on this platform now, or in this.
This
Oh,
this
okay.
platform.
So we can just
Okay.
stand here.
platform is this, right?
Yeah.
Not the.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi.
Okay, okay.
I'm Mimi.
No, I'm asking.
I don't know. I don't know.
Thanks for joining.
Hey. Hello again.
Hello.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Do you want coffee and tea? Or maybe coffee or tea? Maybe not both.
What I came into is so
There's
on
black
point,
coffee
and
there's
it's really
also-
nice to hear people speak like that. So a lot of times, I do feel that there is a way where how you're supposed to speak, which is acceptable when
Yeah.
we're talking about this situation.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And there isn't really room for other opinions. So I'm just like, it's exactly what was going through my mind, and someone is articulating it.
Yeah, we want to open it up now. We've been like
Yeah, we've been talking for
We've
too
been talking a
long.
lot. I think it's time to open it up a bit.
No,
No, for real. Nah. You're here. You're in it.
Oh, is that our train?
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, I can speak.
Everybody, let's go. Oh no, we don't have to really run.
Okay.
This is fake.
It adds drama.
This is fake.
really hilarious.
We just missed the train.
Love and solidarity.
Yes.
So this one is pretty short.
Yeah. I think maybe we open it up a little bit. You guys are riding a train with us, so please, do you guys have questions, your own comments? So we want to make it more of a conversation as well. So help us help. Help.
Okay. I mean, it's been really great. I really love the whole thing, but then the last conversation about kind of understanding that you are, as a person, a woman, a black woman in these institutions, that you yourself are some sort of resource and you need to go in there and, I don't know, that you have something to give, right? And for me, it's firstly, it takes experience to learn that kind of thing, right? Maybe you've been in these institutions long enough to know that, okay, I have something to give and I have something to take and give somewhere else. But it's then how do you, for me it's been grounding my community and understanding, I don't know how to say, if I'm even making sense, but it's if I am taking and giving to a community, what does that community look like and who is it?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
Oof.
We're constantly talking about this.
This is all we do.
Constantly talking. This is all we do.
Yeah.
Of just wanting to have relationships with people, with other thinkers from all over, and it doesn't even have to be people who are embedded within the institution or people who have been trained in a certain way, but people who are game to have conversations long term, not just one event, one lecture, et cetera, but people who can really live your creative life alongside, and that's, I mean, we're still working on that. We're still talking about that. We've known each other for 10 years and end up in these whether or not there are cameras, end up in these hours long conversations where we're just what are we doing? What are we thinking? What are we reading? What are we, all these things. And it's just like, how do you set up, thinking about how do we set up situations or gatherings or connections. Yeah.
And disagreeing with each other
Disagreeing.
a lot. Right now, we've been agreeing a lot, but that's not always the case.
No.
And I think that's another thing too. I think the word community is used, at least in spaces I'm in, community is used to refer to so many different things.
What does it mean?
Yeah, and I think just what you're saying, definitely, it just resonates with me. I read, I think it was on Twitter actually. Somebody, it's it.
Cite it. Cite it.
I wish I did.
Cite that gremlin website.
Bibliography, Twitter. Somebody was saying how a group of people who is just like you is just a scene. Like a community needs to have people who are different from you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about, I was talking to one of my friends, Diana Nucera. She's dope, she's wonderful. And we just recently were talking about the same thing, about community, and about this thing about how you don't always, the community being a thing where you don't always have to agree with or like everyone, but you got their back when they need you.
Yeah.
And you're like willing to do this, engage, you're willing to be there and kind of show up for
Go
them.
to their stuff, read
Go
their
to their
stuff,
things,
like,
participate with them. Do they need help? Like give them the benefit of the doubt, like support them, call them out when things aren't right, but in a way that's loving and there. And we really have been talking about this for over a decade.
Yes.
About what this looks like.
Yes. And still haven't figured it out, honestly. But finding that in like small corners with people, but it's also like it feels so good to have someone engage with your work seriously. Like I think that also like a culture, the culture of critique is pretty thin right now. And like I remember the first talk that I did here, the vulnerability by design talk at EASPIS, there was this question where someone was just like, hey, I think there's this gap in what you think. And I was like, I had to like hold my face from smiling, of being like, yes, tell me like what I am missing, tell me. And then her and me having this back and forth, and I was like, but I would add this, and she was like, wait, but like I think there's also this other piece to it. And I'm like, yes. But like, and like honestly, I went up to her after the talk and like really thanked her, and she was saying to me that like there isn't always the space to have that where people don't get offended. And it's just like, again, instead of seeing your deficit, seeing your resource, seeing criticism as a resource, but also maintaining the skill for yourself of what to take and what to leave.
This is another thing that does require, this is what we're saying is kind of missing, has been missing in some of the institutions we've been in. This requires people having a plethora of references and understanding where you're coming at, so that they're not like, oh, this like basic point, whatever. You know, it takes people, you need something to be able to engage people to that degree. And I think that's part of why it feels so good when someone engages with your work in good faith, like critically and deeply, where they're like, I think you're missing this thing. But they're not like, ha, gotcha, you're wrong, I knew it. You know, they're like, no, there's just this thing that like you haven't considered, because you have this particular positionality. You're not going to know everything. Your knowledge is partial. I'm going to bring something else. That, you're right. It feels so good. It feels, just live for it. I love that.
Yeah, but it's like, that's something you can give to somebody now. And like, that's a place where you can start community from, is like, you have a specific set of resources already. I don't know what the scene is like in South Africa. I don't know all the things that you do. I don't know anything about economics. You have this whole background in economics. And you can like help. I need that help, you know? And like, so many people need that help. And like, how much better would all the work get? All of these things that were being produced, if we had more of like this critical conversation. We were talking about the research that you've been doing about this like 50s, 60s, or 60s, 70s, sort of 80s period of how critics and researchers are like talking to each other. Oh, we're being controlled.
Okay.
This is actually fantastic.
Who has my jacket?
I do.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Could you maybe somewhere new?
Yeah, I have a wallet.
Oh,
this is so great. Yeah, where's your one?
No, it's maybe in the other pocket. Oh, thank you. I think you can just, they kind of blip there.
Good to go.
Yeah. Okay. And now we're also getting off.
Okay. That was actually very real.
Yeah, that was
We did not choreograph that.
So we're now changing to a bus. We're not in a hurry, but we need to go to the bus station, and that's our last.
Our
This is
last
the last
journey.
part.
This is just flying. Yeah.
Yes, because we're kind of seeing now, after complaint, seeing into what we want to see.
Yeah.
You know, the things that we actually love to have
Yeah.
in organizations and in communities. I think it's, which is in many ways the more interesting part.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Not just the,
and the
like,
time where they were like, "This is like how we want the whole talk to go." We're like, "Forget that."
but now we could, you know, we've worked up to it.
Yeah.
Ooh,
There's a gap.
look at our skills. Walking
yes.
backwards.
The support, you love to see it.
Yes,
We love to see support.
we affirm it.
we validate it. We
You know,
love it.
Like a pastor, we affirm it.
Can we get?
Can
we say hallelujah? Can the
Hallelujah. Can the congregation stand?
turn to your neighbor and say it? Say neighbor.
The last church I went to, I was just in this Nigerian church.
Yes.
And we got to the end, and the pastor was like, he's like, I don't know if you want to dance now. He was like, I don't know. And everybody was like, let us dance. Let us dance. And he was like, okay, but we don't have time. And I was like, no. And it was this beautiful choreography. And we were like, you know you're going to let us, because everybody dances up when they give offerings. And it was so amazing. It was such a nice back and forth.
10 minutes
Okay.
until the bus. Not
Okay.
really. I think it's good. Can't wait to possibly visit you in Lagos and start imitating that accent. Yes. Yes.
It's true.
Take it right on.
Can't wait to get
As
my
if it's
pigeon English
my
back.
own.
My
I'd be
sister
like,
and I.
auntie.
Why do I not too much? Oh. Chipped nails.
All right.
Here we are.
Our last little leg.
Yes. How do we want to?
I just said that I agree about being.
Come to us.
Yes.
Come to us, yes.
The institutions have the distractions of the labor. That is, they're losing all the workers, the black, brown, racified workers, because of like the struggle of not being able to participate in productions and doing your own stuff. So I was just wanted to say that it's so nice to hear. Working in culture in Sweden is really like exhausting. It's like Nassim always like, why do you do it, right? Why don't you do your own thing? I'm like, yeah, well, no. It's also being like a person sustaining it within the institution, being an inspirer to the young people, like trying to build some kind of community within the institution as well. You know? But it's hard.
Yeah.
And you get tired, and
No.
you lose your creative source, sort of like. But it's a new year, right?
Yeah,
So
brilliant year.
it is.
Well, what do? You said you lose your creative source. What do you do?
Well,
Sort
I've
of-
been working within culture for like
20 years.
Oh, I mean, what do you do to sustain it? But also,
what do
what do
you
you
do?
do? Yeah, what do you do to bring it back? But you can,
Aghili is a legend.
yeah, like,
Yes.
not like that.
But the thing is, working within, well, I'm doing a lot of clubs, actually.
Yeah. Legendary club.
Yeah, legendary club.
So I used to do this queer club at Söderteatern in Stockholm for 16 years. But then I grew older and wanted to do different stuff. So I was like, let's take this into the institution. But it's really hard because it's like a different set of how we can collaborate within the institutions with other people.
And how do you maintain your creativity with all, because it is hard work.
It is. Well, I've been doing clubs outside the institution.
Yeah.
There we go.
What I did. That's what I just went to job to work, do the children youth, work with that, and that was cool. Like, but to sustain, I actually worked with my own stuff.
Yeah.
I did. But I think it's the institution's job to give us a sustainable work environment, to be able to talk about this, to be encouraged to talk about this, how we can actually have an institutions within Swedish culture that actually reflects on how Sweden looks like. I mean, I'm turning 48, and I think my institution were like 700 workers, and we're like 3 persons of color. If you don't, if you don't count the people like the local workers, the one who cleans.
It's the cleaning.
But they're trying. I mean, I would say. Sort of. Since this is live stream, I have to say. I know they were like 2 black actresses. Yes, they did.
Yeah.
But it's slow work. It's like marathon.
Not a sprint.
I know, but it's also like I kind of wonder at that slowness too, and like what that slowness protects, or what that slowness puts obstacles in front of, and how much opportunity cost that is, or like the sorry, what the opportunity cost of that is, where it's just like how much work could have happened if this had moved a bit faster. But also like something else that you said that I think is interesting that we've talked about before is like when people are like, okay, let's make our own, or like there's like this push to make your own thing, go make your own space, and how that starts to create these isolated points, where it's like the opportunity of, I think, a really good or really interesting institution is like a lot of people can come in and then do that deep work together. But then there's so many situations where it's like, make your own thing, and then within that point, that isolated island, it's just like there are these different people who have their different ideas, and it's like, well, instead of arguing, go make your own thing, and then it just becomes these like tinier and tinier and tinier things until like you're sitting at home with your hands folded in your lap, like, I guess this is my own thing.
I love things that are hyper local and very attentive to the needs of a particular group.
Yes.
So, in fact, I did this very small kind of like seminar thing recently, and something we were talking about, I think I told you, talking with this incredible group of students, and we were talking about the best groups that they've been a part of, like the best communities, the ones that have most been like towards liberation, where they felt like they were sustained and where they felt like they were working together with people. And we asked what those things have in common. And they said, one of the things that they said was that they all have something, they're tied either by a goal or by an issue of trying to accomplish something. Sometimes it's organizing, not always. Maybe it's like the issue is like thinking about our work and engaging deeply in each other's work, whatever. But the other thing they said is the groups always end. They said these groups, like, that is a thing. Like, all of these groups, they've been an era, and there's a point where I am no longer part of it, where we can leave and do something else. And that's important. That's important too. So like this small splintering is okay, so long as you're not like, you must be, like, you understand, actually we are constantly forming these small like communities and moving around. I think that's fine. I think that's how the work has to get done. Yeah. But I do think that's the thing that gets lost in us. I'm very critical of a lot of institutions, but the thing that works well is the idea that there's something that remains and people can leave and do other things.
Yes.
And that's powerful. There's something to that.
Creating like a flow where people can be like, oh, I was there in 86. Oh, you're here. Yeah. And like almost the people themselves become this archive of thought. But the bad thing is like when everyone is just like, yep, they're still teaching the same thing. I'm like, you know, 01 did the same thing, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like this time-based quality. There's such an opportunity to then create those long-term direct connections, like what you were saying earlier, in terms of there are people who came before you, and it's not just that it's a situation where those people burned out or dropped off, but it's like they had their time in this space and then they moved on.
Yeah, that thinking about exits from things like this, I think it's so important. So often I see people who I care about a lot getting so burnt out, and it's like that's how they leave. They sort of like fall away, like drained of all of their energy. It's like they've been wrung out, and then they're flung to the side, and then they pick themselves up, and they're like, all right, on to the next, you know? And how do you like allow people to go and say there's space, like permission? We talk a lot about allowance and permission, but how do you say no, like go? You've done this work, that's beautiful. You can do other work too, and it doesn't have to be here. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that question of how you allow people, like in organizing too, there's this energy of like a new person comes in and there's so much excitement around a new person coming into the space. You want to give them a lot of responsibility immediately, and within like, you know, a couple months they're like running the space basically. And like when did they have time to like learn what the legacy of the place was, or like if there's a legacy of the place? And another question is like when people burn out, you often can't get back in touch with them to be like, hey, how did you deal with this in your era? Because they don't want to re-engage anymore.
But then I think it's so hard. It's so hard because so many, I think of this, you can also see some of this in like open source movements. These places that are like to what you were saying, there's the thing that you do, and then there's the place where you go to do what you really want to do. But like you're not as funded there, and it's harder, and the work, like you have to just do so much more. Yeah. I think there's this whole need to constantly scale that has been taken from industry and brought into so many other spaces. And that's why sometimes I'm like, it's okay. Your art piece can end. This working group can end. You can have accomplished a thing and now disperse and do other stuff. This, like, the idea of allowing us to end things in a really graceful and loving way, I think I like that. I think there's something in there, like focusing on these exits rather than the entrance and growth always being the big thing. Yes. Sometimes, you know, and this happens with funding too. Like sometimes foundations are like, how will you scale though? Right now you're you're doing this thing for a community of 40 people, but we need it to be 140 in 2 months. And does it have to be?
And how that ends up stretching like a person super thin so they can't go deep. Yeah. And I really respect, and we've talked about this too, like really respecting organizations or movements that have this time-based quality and also that are extremely tied to what their purpose is. And when someone asks them to do something outside of their purpose, it's like, actually, sorry, I can't do that. Like, this is what we do. We don't do this, we don't do that. And like, not to say that those things are not valuable, but it's just not what we can take on.
I think that also allows for a lack of, you know, something I keep thinking about nowadays is not just reacting to what's going on, how you as a group that is sort of like an alternative space or like counter to a mainstream movement or mission, how you get to be advancing your own thing as opposed to responding to what you're seeing, you know? And how do you do that? What does that look like? And I think that's like a question that I'm constantly tossing around, because the thing that you're responding to is always the most immediate, and it can be hard to occupy this space of the imagination. And I mean that not in a wishy-washy way. I mean that very much like thinking differently about the kind of world you want to see, the kind of societies you want to see, the kind of interpersonal like ways of being together that you want to see. It takes work. It's a work. It's another form of labor.
And when you get...
No, you go.
No, please. Yes, please.
Okay. I was just thinking about what you said, Cynthia, in our talks, and I'm always like, but now you have to get out of the institutions. Because for me, it's like the Toni Morrison quotes, right? That when I'm not in the institutions, I get more intelligent, more creative, it's more actually generous, and because I don't have to deal with the racism. And the racism is not just like in the people who work in the institutions, it's in the walls. It's like in the architecture often. So of course, I mean, I really want all of the resources and the, you know, all the good stuff that other people have actually being just everything is adjusted to their bodies, right? But I just wanted to, like, what happens with your body when you are in those, and then of course I totally agree with all the, like, it's really important with the sustainability also, like making or being a part of a history, because it's easier when it's in an institution, right? Because there's much more time for archiving or stuff, just like putting stuff down, or but like, how can we have strategy? How can we like also not like taking care of ourselves, being in those institutions and still keeping like not be that affected by that racism that actually, like, it's a bodily thing, right? Like, you get stopped all the time.
Yeah.
Tell us the answer.
Of course, you've been addressing this a lot, but I mean, I just want to put, like, because sometimes when we talk about like institutions, not institution, what it does, it's more like on a symbolic level, but it's also like a very physical, right?
Yeah.
But it's also like, I don't mean to create a dichotomy of like you're in the institution or you're out of it, because like also sometimes these community spaces become institutions as well, where you get caught up in not the same challenges, but different ones that also are exact a lot of energy. And how you take care of yourself, we also talk about this a lot, is like when can you step away? Like when do you not get overtaken by like, it's my specific responsibility to do this? And that's what I really like about what you were saying on one of the other trains about diminish yourself a bit, okay? Don't think that it always has to be you to do X, Y, or Z, because then that leaves you room to step away. And we've also talked about, you know, some of the work that's being made about like joy and like self-care and things like this, and how that in a lot of ways has been co-opted by like more capitalist or transactional things, but also actually thinking about how you take care of yourself. And it's not always like fun stuff. It's not always like, I'm gonna go to a spa, or I'm gonna etc. It's like, sometimes it's like you need to take a step back so you can go grocery shopping, so you can do your laundry, so you can remember all of the things that you need to do in a week, and like you need to remember to like write down all of these things in your calendar so you're not missing things, and also so you can see all the stuff that you're agreeing to and ensuring that that's a sustainable amount of things, you know? I mean, I think about also refusal. We talk about this as well. I think of like talking about like historical figures. Like I think about Josephine Baker, and I think a lot of the times when we talk about Josephine Baker, it's like she was a high-flying gal who did her flapper dances all over Europe. But actually she was also this person who had a lot of things asked of her, like not just as, you know, in these resistance movements in France, but also in the civil rights, as like a Black American woman who was living in Europe, of like saying, what are your responsibilities towards the civil rights movement in the US? And like the ways that she said no to certain asks also sort of had people criticizing her in a way of like, things are so urgent and everything is, you know, like these politics are so important, how can you turn down giving your time or giving your life for these things? And I respect that self-knowledge to say, I'm not gonna step into this, I'm not gonna take this on.
Yeah, I love all that. I think about my parents a lot, because I'm always like, oh, they've done so much. But like I'm Nigerian, you know, my dad talks about being Civil War, the Afghan War in Nigeria, being like on the tail end of that, and as a kid like cycling and carrying wounded soldiers to the airport. And then he was also like one of the first black engineers in so many countries, and they put him with like they would put him with like racist groups on intentionally. They'd be like, you got to make it work, you know. And he just, something I take from my parents, my mom has so many stories like this too, is their sense of not being, they don't have this like, I'm the hero. They're not like, I'm the one fight. They're just like, I'm doing the work. I'm just doing this kind of matter of factness about it, of like, you do the things that need to be done, just we do them. And it's not like a huge production. And I like that. And then I think a lot, this accountability really comes through, because for me, what I think about all the people and groups that I'm accountable to, and it's not so simple as like just like based on race and class. There's some loads of different factors.
Yes.
Think about all the groups and people I'm accountable to, but I'm also accountable to myself, but no more or less. I'm just another one of those things. And so it makes it really, honestly in my head, I think about myself as like another person, and I'm like, all right, so in the same way you would treat this person, you would like go out and do this for them, I'm gonna do that for myself in moments too. Now I'm gonna do that for these students, now I'm gonna do that for here. And for me, kind of bringing myself out and being like, you are important, but just as important as these other ones, it helps me deal with this question of how do I don't know what to call it, this way of like caring for my own self too. Yeah. But in a way that again is just like, do what needs to be done. Yeah. You need to eat and you need to take care of yourself, so you're not gonna do this, you're not gonna show up.
And like you can just be overtaken so much by people being like, this is so important, this is so urgent, this is gonna save lives, this is gonna do this. And like you see people so run down.
Yeah.
So run down. Yeah.
When I was a kid, my dad told me this thing. My dad is famous for saying stuff like this. But I remember I was like, Dad, I have this thing and I'm in this production and I have to be there. And he was like, my dear, you're not indispensable. I was like, for your dad to tell you that, it's kind of cold. But as I get older, I see what he meant. He's like, there's always, like, there are other people. This is a community. Other people are doing this work. Don't elevate yourself so much. You're not the only person who could do this. If you're not there, someone else can do it too. Yeah. But like, stand up when you can be the one to do that. That helps. I say it as if this is very simple. It's not.
No, it's really very hard, and I'm constantly not doing this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
I think that vulnerability point is so important. It's like you have to look so strong all the time to not just be in institutions, but be in doing your work at all, applying for funding, like all this stuff. You have to be so strong. And sometimes, especially if someone who's younger than me is like, can I have your advice about this or that? I'm just like, this is what I do, but also I'm a mess, okay? I am a mess. Like, people are just like, but you're doing this and you're doing that and blah, blah. Yes, I'm doing all these things. I'm exhausted. I'm so tired. And like, I do have these periods where it's like, I haven't had time to do my laundry, or I haven't had time to go grocery shopping, and I'm just like, eating out a lot, which I don't want to do, and spends more money than I want to spend, and things like that, where it's like, you're right, it's like you're in this survival mode. But like, I do, like, I've had moments where it's like, I'm in a place where I feel good, and I'm also rejecting other people's urgency. This is something that is completely a part of like the economies that we participate in, is you feel a sense of has to be done, has to be done, has to be done, has to be me, to the point where you've integrated into yourself so many other people's urgency that you don't take on your urgency to disconnect. Like, your body feels an urgency to disconnect from a lot of these things, and it's seen as unprofessional in a way to reject the urgency of others. Yeah.
There's also this thing, I think all of y'all are talking about some things that have these thread lines that connect, but that question also, when the work you do is co-opted by an institution where you're like, actually, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with a lot of what you're doing. And now I'm here to try to like craft out these spaces where I can do what I want to do and also support those who are also here. But I see how now it looks like I'm complicit in a system that I don't approve of. I didn't claim this. And I think, so this question, like, it's draining. It feels like everything is, you're like, it's draining to be here. I'm trying to do a lot. It's hard, like, the work I want to do is behind the scenes. It's not being seen. I'm trying to craft out the space to do what I want to do as well at the same time.
This is us.
This is it.
Yeah.
All right, we did it.
Okay. Thank you so much. I've been carrying those around.
I see.
Yeah.
Let's do it here.
Thomas, is it okay?
So
Should I?
what are we looking at?
Oh, it's okay.
Talk a bit more about the space because we don't know anything about
Yeah,
it.
okay.
Yeah.
So this is part of, it's Södertälje municipality, and it's just outside a small village called Höle. And this is like on the edge. So the region of Stockholm ends here. So we are still on the Stockholm side, but just south of this is Stockholm no more. And around this area there's a lot of like organic farming and also gardens, a lot due to the anthroposophic movement. And that has, like, they have, this area is where they live and work. So this is the old church school, but now it's different studios for artists. There's also like a cinema club. We can watch movies together because it's not a lot happening in this area. There you go.
Do you live here?
I can feel the smell of my mom's cooking.
Yeah.
Wow!
Welcome.
Hello! Hi!
Hello. So welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for that.
And this is the amazing chef for today. Welcome. Thank you so much.
This looks fantastic.
Yeah, this is great.
Okay. Then a lawyer said, "But what of our laws, master?" And he answered, "You delight in laying down laws, yet you delight more in breaking them. Like children playing by the ocean who build sand towers with consistency and then destroy them with laughter. But while you build your sand towers, the ocean brings more sand to the shore, and then you destroy them. And when you destroy them, the ocean laughs with you. Verily, the ocean laughs always with the innocent."
But what of those to whom life is not an ocean, and man-made laws are not sand towers, but to whom life is a rock, and the law is a chisel with which they would carve it in their own likeness? What of the cripple who hates dancers? What of the ox who loves his yoke, and deems the elk and deer of the forest stray and vagrant things? What of the old serpent who cannot shed his skin, and calls all others naked and shameless? And of him who comes early to the wedding feast, and when overfed and tired goes his way, saying that all feasts are violation and all feasters lawbreakers.
What shall I say of these, save that they stand too in the sunlight, but with their backs to the sun? They see only their shadows, and their shadows are their laws. And what is the sun to them but a caster of shadows? And what is it to acknowledge the laws, but to stoop down and trace their shadows upon the earth? But you who walk facing the sun, what images drawn on the earth can hold you? Sorry. You who travel with the wind, what weather vane shall direct your course? What man's law shall bind you if you break your yoke, but upon no man's prison door? What laws shall you fear if you dance but stumble against no man's iron chains? And who is he that shall bring you to judgment if you tear off your garment, yet leave it in no man's path? People of Orphalese, you can muffle the drum, and you can loosen the strings of the lyre, but who shall command the skylark not to sing? Okay, so this is called Gravity by Angel Nafis after Carrie Mae Weems' Kitchen Table series.
And it's sort of split into two different parts.
So I'm just going to scroll it for you since
Great.
you struggle with scrolling so much.
Yeah, I do. So this is the whole thing.
Yes.
Okay. Right, and they're kind of in response, and they have they kind of embody different tones, well, I guess you'll see. So, part one, the straw. Can you throw this away? Maybe you should hire more black staff. Where are you really from? You're not busy, are you? You look ethnic today. Where's the African American section? Can you turn the music down? Faster, faster, faster. Let me see those eyes. Beautiful. If you were mine, I'd never let you leave the house. It's like you went straight to Africa to get this one. Is that your hair? I mean your real hair, black ass. Your gums are black. You stink. You need a perm. I don't mean to be racist, but you're scarred over. I'm the one bleeding. You're just going to rip apart whatever I say. You've said sorry only 2 times. We tacitly agreed, then dead me.
The camel's back. When you're born on somebody else's river in a cursed boat, it's all downhill from there. Ha, just kidding. I'd like to tell you what I don't have time for, but I don't have time. Catch up. Interrogate that, boss. Halo. I juke the apocalypse. Fluff my feathers. Diamond my neck. Boom like an 808. 1 in a million. I don't want no scrubs. You don't know my name. Everything I say is a spell. I'm 25. I'm 90. I'm 10. I'm a moonless charcoal. A sour lover. Hidden teeth beneath the velvet. I'm here and your eyes lucky. I'm here and your future lucky. Ha! God told me to tell you I'm pretty. Ha! My skin Midas touched the buildings I walk by. Ha! Every day I'm alive. The weather report says gold. I know. I should leave y'all alone. Salt earth like to say stay salty. But here go the mirror egging on my spirit. Why I can't go back or the reasons it happened. Name like a carriage of fire. Baby, it's real. The white face peeking through the curtain. Mule and God. I'm blunted off my own stank. I'm bad. I dig graves when I laugh.